Every Wednesday at this time, we are joined by Carleton University political scientist Elliot Tepper to talk about the big international stories and how they affect Canada. Good morning.
Good morning, Mark.
And today, the UN Security Council has been meeting, and they've been holding emergency talks after this chemical attack in Syria, one of the worst in years. And I wonder if this has the potential to be a turning point. People have been talking about doing something to end this war for some time. Mm-hmm. Is this the kind of thing that could be potentially a tipping point?
The week that we're in is perhaps a tipping point, or certainly a clarifying moment for our very rapidly evolving international politics. Will the UN Security Council meeting today be that tipping point? No, but it's part and parcel of a much larger picture. What we have going on in front of us, we always have a lot of news. You and I, the world doesn't stop. But this is a particularly important, perhaps pivotal week in terms of world politics. We've talked for a long time about the fact that the geopolitical tectonic plates really are going to shift, that the artificial situation that we only had one superpower was going to change. The question was how. And we've also talked about Syria a great deal on this show over a long period of time, saying that it's been, in effect, the epicenter of world politics because the Arab Spring uprising, which is very local, and the collapse of the whole Arab state system across the region, then the drawing in of Shia and Sunni fighters, proxy wars there, now the great powers. So we have everything going on in Syria, and Syria is once again front and center back in our news because of this horrific chemical weapon attack. This chemical weapon attack is first and foremost a humanitarian disaster. It's always very easy to get caught up with the politics of it. Theresa May said this, and, Putin said that.
And what does it mean for the
UN and so forth. But at the bottom on the ground, people have been suffering. Syria, as I've been calling it on air here with you, is a carnal house between basically a sociopathic government bombing its own people with the help of the Iranians and the Russians, who have had their own kind of iron curtain of bombing to tip the balance of the war. But beyond that, we now have a situation of Syria once again justifiably, I think, being accused of using banned nerve gas against their own population. That, in turn, brings to mind the whole Obama red line. Well, we talked about that at the time of the red line. So there's lots of things going on. One of the things to keep in mind here is that people are suffering on the ground. It's not exclusive to Syria. Iraq has had massive bombings while we're talking about it, for that matter, in Pakistan. Shia majority or minorities being attacked in their mosques and so forth. What we have going on in Syria now is an ongoing disaster of geopolitics, and there does not seem to be an end in sight. If it's a tipping point, it's a tipping point in the sense of clarifying the nature of the powers involved. Trump has been saying, we're not going to get involved basically with internal. Al-Sisi was just, let's talk about this, because this is a Middle East story. Washington has been hosting a number of Middle East leaders. The president of Egypt is there now, and it was just told by the president of the United States, don't worry what you do internally. We don't care about that. Russia has been given that green light too. We don't care. We want to work with Russia. Okay. Can you work with Russia, which is working with the Assad regime and Iran, now blatantly violating the most fundamental of human rights and the wars of law? So humanitarian disaster is also a violation of humanitarian law and wars against the crimes against humanity. All this is going on in front of us. Will this be a clarifying moment? Yes, it's clarifying that Donald Trump's policy as a world leader is coming under severe question. You can't work with the Russians if they're complicit in this. On the other hand, what do you do? Blaming the Obama administration for past weakness, okay. If they were weak, this is what the Trump administration is saying. If Obama was weak and that's why we have this problem, what does that mean, Mark? Does the U.S. now plan to be strong? Are we headed for a new Middle East war with American troops on the ground? All of this is now, because of the attack we're talking about, brought into question.
Let's turn to the other big international event that happened this week. And like what happened in Syria, there are casualties, of course, and that is the the terrorist attack in
Yes.
St. Petersburg. And of course, not to ignore the any sort of sympathy or empathy for the people who are going through the crisis that results from that, but looking at it from a political perspective, what are the consequences of that? I know that where there has been common ground in the past between Russia and the United States, even before Donald Trump, it was on fighting terrorism.
Yes. So once again, we're faced with the conundrum, the hard choices of world politics. We shouldn't forget the people on the ground. We've all been on metros. I've been on that one, actually. So
in St. Petersburg.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And London, of course, has had there. So
sure.
We can all identify with that. Anybody who's been on a metro, including I don't even want to talk about Canada in this regard because we've been blessed so far. Yes. What does this mean going forward? The war against Islamic terrorism that the Russians genuinely face because of the situation in Chechnya, and so many Chechnyan fighters have gone to Syria to fight. Now, maybe one of them came home. This happened to be a Russian citizen. So once again, we have a homegrown terrorist. This was a Russian citizen, apparently, a 22-year-old who blew himself up, a suicide bomber. What do we do when the strands of world politics tie countries together? We're all in a fight against terrorism. At the same time, we are faced with a Russia that's opposing any possibility of cooperation over the use of sarin gas in Syria. The Trump administration, the Canadian government, has to also come to grips with the fact you have a country that you can't live without, that's both China and Russia, but boy, are they hard to live with.
We have lots to talk about in American politics, including the visit by, the visit that Donald Trump is going to be hosting this week of the leader from China, and the Supreme Court nomination. So why don't we take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about some of those issues and more with Elliot Tepper from Carleton University on Ottawa Today. Elliot Tepper is with us every Wednesday on Ottawa Today to talk about the big international stories. And so this week at Mar-a-Lago, not at the White House, but at Mar-a-Lago, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, is going to be visiting Donald Trump. And the fact that it's happening at Mar-a-Lago is interesting off the bat. Let's
link the last stories in this one. Donald Trump has made a point. He just made it most vociferously through his UN, as well as his foreign secretary, but also at the UN, that the United States isn't going to tell countries how to run themselves internally. Well, now you have Assad using chemical weapons. So he now has to make a choice here. Is he going to stick with that or not? He wanted to work with Russia, but you can't work with Russia. They're about to veto anything at the UN. But this kind of message is music to the ears of China. China tends to vote with Russia on such matters at the UN, such as today, not because they have such a vested interest in Syria. They like the idea that other states aren't going to interfere in your domestic politics as a matter of principle. This is a country that fought a revolution. The party in power today was a revolutionary party, and they like the principle of non-interference. Now we have perhaps the biggest ticket meeting we can possibly have. The relationship between China and China and the United States will set the tone for world politics. Here is an emerging power that is now asserting itself, and an American president who basically says, I don't want to be leader of the free world anymore, and has withdrawn in certain key ways. And then China has said, we'll fill that vacuum. You don't want the TPP? Fine, we have an alternative set. You don't want to support climate change? No problem. We, China, will be the leaders in globalization, pro-globalization, pro-free trade, and pro-climate control. So we have an emerging power meeting a president who says, well, I'm not sure I want to be that kind of a leader. I want to talk about trade. So this is a very crucial meeting today. It's crucial in two ways. First, the content. There is no set agenda. You and I can speculate right now on that. But the second part is, how are these two leaders going to get along? They're going to be sizing each other up. They're going to be trying to decide, can we get along? Can we make deals with each other? Are we going to be enemies? Are we going to be frenemies? Are we going to be friends? So the atmospherics of this are almost as important as the content. Mar-a-Lago, yes, what an interesting choice. Let's go to that.
Are they going to golf?
Well, I was thinking, what a pinnacle of capitalist opulence! what a display of over the top gold glitter is Mar-a-Lago, and what a place, therefore, to meet the leader of a communist state who is.
That has more recently embraced capitalism on some level.
Wild West capitalism at that. But remember, Xi Jinping is leading an anti-corruption campaign. Capitalism can't corrupt our government because can't corrupt the party, therefore put the party in jeopardy. Party maintenance is really the center of his existence. So, yes, there's another side issue here. Will they play golf? You know that ahead of the arrival of Xi Jinping in Mar-a-Lago came the Japanese Prime Minister Abe, and he brought gold-plated golf clubs worth almost $4,000 a club. So they did play golf. No, we will not be seeing golf played at the golf club because the Communist Party of China has said, quoting Mao Zedong, that this is a game for millionaires, and we frown on it. So officially, the party opposes golf, while at the meantime, golf courses are proliferating all over China. So no golf, but a lot of conversation.
And what type of tone do you expect Donald Trump to bring to this meeting? It's been interesting to watch the approach that he's taken. Obviously, all of his rhetoric during the campaign was America first, and then once you are elected president, you have the job of having to sit down with these other leaders and forge some kind of relationship with them. And even Trump is not going to be as defiantly pro-America in those kinds of discussions as he would be on the campaign trail or at a rally, right?
Each of these leaders have to impress each other, and they have to impress the home audience in each case.
Right.
So they each have to look like they're strong, they're not giving in. Let's talk about it from the Chinese side, because we can speculate fairly accurately what the American agenda might be. What's the Chinese agenda? They want to do a few things. One, most importantly, Xi Jinping has to say, I'm as strong a leader as anybody in the world. I'm certainly not any weaker than this fellow Trump, because come fall, there's the 19th Party Congress where he's going to be cementing his rule. And he's just been named core leader, a very key thing. So he's cementing his role within the Chinese political system, and this meeting is a good part of that. Trump has to say at the same time, I'm looking after the American workers. So meanwhile, we have a wild card. That's North Korea. While we're doing the conversations about trade and about what are we going to do about tariffs, will there be a 35% tariff? Will there be a trade war between China and America? And both of these leaders have to waffle that. That's one of the prime agenda items. How do we get out of having a trade war while still protecting our positions? But now we have to do, what do we do about North Korea? We've been saying here long ago, but also Trump has been saying this, others, that the only answer for North Korea is China finally getting serious about taking Kim Jong-un on. And just to emphasize the point, Kim Jong-un fires off another missile with solid rocket fuel, so it's potentially a more powerful missile, just as this meeting is about to take place. So we have Kim Jong-un acting up, just as this meeting is about to take place, managing the potential breakout nuclear power, North Korea, which is a destabilizing element everywhere in the world, but particularly in the backyard of China, which says its overwhelming principle of foreign affairs is stability. Well, how are we going to do this? So these leaders have a lot to talk about. We'll have to see if they actually get down to brass tacks or whether this is getting to know you session, a bit of arm wrestling going on, looking each other in the eye. The contrast in styles is immense. Xi Jinping likes formality. He likes scripted things. He likes politeness. And here we are having an informal meeting with a Donald Trump who clearly is just the opposite in every possible way. My guess is this. Everybody will be very polite.
Right.
They have not apparently agreed. We hear normally there's a communique agreed on in advance of a meeting, which is given out 1 minute after the meeting ends. Apparently that hasn't happened in this case. There are hardliners behind Donald Trump, theoretically in charge of the China file. That is, the Trump people who are in charge of the China file are all very much hawks when it comes to China on trade. Peter Navarro, the head of the Trade Council in particular, but Steve Bannon as well, and they say, they've been eating our lunch, we have to do so. Will there be a change in the terms of trade? So first of all, I think that it's likely to be a polite meeting. Second of all, they'll agree that it has been a polite meeting and that's been fruitful. I think the groundwork is there for the possibility of two things. One, Donald Trump would like a grand bargain of some kind. We aren't sure what that means. The Chinese wouldn't mind a grand bargain as long as it looks after their interests. So we'd have to see if the outlines of a grand bargain are laid, not only in the substance of the talk, but in how these two get along. Will these two strong leaders try to divide up East Asia and Southeast Asia? And what about the South China Sea and the militarization? What about North Korea? And what about trade? These are very tough issues. And in my opinion, Xi Jinping is a very hard man. He's survived a much tougher political system than the American one. And he now has to deal with Donald Trump. I suspect he will leave this meeting thinks, I can deal with this guy.
Quick final question to you. We only have about 30 seconds left, but there's this showdown over the Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch continues, and it could end up leading to a rule change in the Senate over filibustering.
Very quickly, Donald Trump needs a win. He needs it with China today, so that will affect the talks coming. It will affect the possibility that Gorsuch will get on. They will do anything to get Gorsuch on the Supreme Court because it fulfills promises, but also this is an administration that's had a less than successful launch in all kinds of ways, and they need a win. They will get it with Gorsuch, but whether that's a win for America remains to be seen.
All right. Thank you, Elliot. Elliot Tepper from Carleton University, who's with us every Wednesday on Ottawa Today.